All right, let's take a look at what's happening this week. We have a Leo full moon. We have a Sun square Uranus happening right after. We also have Mercury entering Pisces. And then finally, Mars at the station degree. Not quite stationing yet, but at that degree, which still means something. Let's take a look at Monday. As always, Monday is the moon's day, and the moon is waxing in Leo. She's in Saturn's decan and Jupiter's terms, moving from a Venus trine and heading towards a Jupiter sextile. This is a really nice day. It's really nice to have the moon moving from benefic to benefic. In astrology is what we call a benefic enclosure. Think of it as the moon moving from a good place to another good place. Venus is in Aries right now, which makes things a little complicated, but still, I think it just adds to this sort of flair that the moon has today. This is why in the image I have this singer performing alongside a band and just having a big blast of a moment. It's kind of like her last performance, the last sort of hurrah of whatever it is that she has been doing during this lunation cycle. So I think that this can be really good, especially as we're going to have a full moon coming up really soon. And I think it just drives the spirit of optimism, of moving forward, and especially with the moon moving towards Jupiter at the beginning of the day, we're really kind of thinking about all the possibilities that lie ahead for us. Last week, we spent a lot of time planning and processing and thinking, and I think to some degree we will continue doing that, but at least the full moon might set some of those ideas into motion, so we're not just in that heady space. Now that the moon is in Leo, we're really kind of just throwing ourselves out there and throwing a little bit of a show. And it is for those reasons that I settled at a 2.5 difficulty today and a 4 utility. I think that difficulty for today might be that the entire lunation cycle has been kind of tiring. So maybe by this point, we're really kind of super drained. But I think the utility is that we're really able to push and overcome some of that tiredness, especially with that so much support from the benefics today. It's really nice to see that. And some of the signs that should be focusing on today are Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Pisces. All right, moving on to our Tuesday. It is February 11th, Mars's day. Mars is in Cancer, retrograde, fallen in his own element, and Mercury's decan and terms, separating from a trine and soon stationing direct in 11 days. And of course, today is also the full moon, very important to note. And one of the reasons why I think it's really important to note that this is a full moon is because it kind of echoes, sorta, not quite, the previous full moon in Cancer, because the previous full moon in Cancer was conjoined Mars, but now we just have the next full moon happening in Mars's day. And so this theme of completion and culmination in Mars is very much like in that space, especially as Mars is pretty much where it's going to be when its station is direct. It's not going to walk backwards anymore for that much longer because he's just really slow right now. So there's really this big sense of completion coming on with Mars, not just because of the full moon, but also because Mars is about to station direct. And so what I was feeling for today is a continued theme from last week. Last week, we were dealing with the Saturn trine, giving Mars sort of like the juice and the perseverance to continue and tackle all these problems that Mars will have to face one last time. But I think today, after Saturn and Mars have moved on from each other a little bit, we're getting a little bit more space to just take that deep breath before we eventually have to move forward again. I'm gonna notice in the image, Mars is still by that waterfall that we talked about last week. But now Mars is having this big view of the full moon. It's getting this big view of what's ahead. Even though the night might be dark, even though the path forward might be dark because Mars is still fallen, the moon is still kind of shining a light on where to go next. And it's also interesting to consider that the full moon is happening in Mars's decan, which is all about fighting for oneself. And so I think that this is very much the mood of today, like the stillness before we take our next step forward in many ways. Mars has been retrograde for so long and will really only wrap up this cycle in April. So there's a lot more that is going to happen, but now we just have a better picture of what we're dealing with. So I think that the exciting thing about today is that. But yes, and it's for those reasons that I gave today a pretty even score, a 2.5 difficulty and a 2.5 utility. And the difficulty is just, we're dealing with the same. The utility is we're dealing with the same. And in dealing with the same, we at least know what it is that we're doing. So Mars is a lot less lost, I think, and this is something that definitely warrants a certain degree of celebration, I would say. But the signs that should be paying attention to today are Aries, Cancer, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Aquarius. All right, moving on to February 12th, it is Mercury's day. Mercury is in Aquarius, out of sect in their own element in the moon's decan and Saturn's terms, recently opposed by the moon. And there's really not that much going on with Mercury today, other than the fact that Mercury is really getting ready to move out of Aquarius. Typically, I wouldn't add an aspect that really just happened in the past, but because the moon moves so fast, I really think that there's something in there, especially because this was the full moon that opposed Mercury. As you can see in the image, we have Mercury, this little guy, kind of just bummed out, walking forward as Lady Moon walks in the background and she's feeling herself in all her leonine glory. And even more so this day with the moon having gone into Virgo. And it's interesting to even think about the moon being in Mercury's sign while Mercury is unable to aspect it or see it. So it's kind of like the moon is really kind of cramping Mercury's style in a way. It's kind of like taking over Mercury's zone as Mercury is getting ready to enter a sign that Mercury is not super stoked about, which is Pisces. And so I feel like today, I don't know, I think the key word that I was thinking about for this was almost winning second place. It's like Mercury has been trying so hard. Last week we were talking about the Mercury Cazimi and how Mercury is just so forward thinking, trying to like really fix so many of the issues with the world. But then now a lot of that maybe has cast a weight upon the shoulders of Mercury because the moon came up and didn't do as much, but still shone a whole lot brighter than Mercury. And I think that this can be a little bit of the situation today, this idea of being obfuscated by somebody who's a little shinier, a little brighter, but who may not be as smart or as clever or didn't work as hard as you did. Sometimes we lose even when we really should have won, and that can be difficult to work with. And I think today is one of those days. And it's for those reasons that I gave today a 3.5 difficulty and a 2 utility. I think the difficulty can be in being the second place or the second best or the one that's being overlooked, even though you feel and even though you might actually deserve the first place. The utility of today is in being a good loser. Second place is still second place. And sometimes even just having the skill is enough of a victory rather than the prize itself. Because chances are the moon won this thing, but if she doesn't have the skills to replicate her victory, she won't. But you might have lost today, but you do have the skills to replicate it, so you may win next time. And that's just how life goes. And some of the signs that should be paying attention to today are Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, and Aquarius. All right, moving on to February 13th. That is, or Thursday, Jupiter's day. Jupiter is in Gemini, in detriment, in his element, in Mars's decan, in his own terms, recently separating from a moon square. It's very interesting that the moon is kind of just crimping everybody's stuff. From Wednesday to Thursday, I think the Jupiter situation can be a little bit different. Where Mercury was having their style cramped by the moon, Jupiter is kind of just lost and trying to get some sort of insight that will help Jupiter move on to the next things that Jupiter's got to do, to the next degree. Like let us state the facts that Jupiter's still at that station degree pretty much. It has not really moved forward after the station. And so I sense that Jupiter is still kind of like surveying the land. And this is what I have in the image. Jupiter is in this library and he comes to this librarian in hopes that she can guide him. But it doesn't seem like Jupiter's all that stoked about the information that he's been given. Following the through line of the story with Mercury, if the moon is kind of being a pseudo Mercury in Virgo right now, Jupiter asking assistance from the moon in Gemini might not work so well. The reason why that is because the moon does well in earth signs, which Virgo is, but she doesn't do as well in air signs, especially Gemini. And so it can be that Jupiter's just asking the right questions to the wrong person, and you could be that person today. And it's for those reasons that I gave today a 2.5 difficulty and a 2.5 utility. Same sort of thing. I think that today can be just a day of spinning. The difficulty and the utility being evened out is less about the difficulty and the utility being the same, and more about Jupiter just not really being able to do much right now. But the signs I should be paying attention to today are Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. All right, moving on to our Friday. It is February 14th. Venus is in Aries, out of element and detriment. Mars is decan and Jupiter's terms, moving towards a Jupiter sextile. And she's also slow, really getting ready for that retrograde. And the thing that I was thinking about for today is kind of building up on the story of last week for Venus. Venus, last week, was just getting ready to go out and party. This week, Venus is a party, especially as she's approaching that Jupiter sextile. This Jupiter sextile is very interesting because it will never actually complete, but Jupiter and Venus are both moving really slow. So they're kind of like looking at each other and kind of like anticipating that something's going to happen, something really good, especially through a sextile and involving both of those. But it kind of just deflates and it goes nowhere. Really, they're only going to meet each other like way later on. So I think that today can have this sense of like, yay, let's celebrate, let's party, but maybe we shouldn't? Like, why are we partying in the first place? Is this partying maybe hiding some other thing that's going on, especially considering the Venus retrograde? And so this is why I'm thinking this is more of like a day drinking Venus, kind of being messy and going all over the place, rather than a true bounteous and luxurious Venus Jupiter sextile. I think we're a little bit on the side of too much right now, and I think also a thing that I'd like to point out with this image is that Venus is also on her own. It's not like she's partying with her friends or with her lovers or with whoever. Literally everybody in the background is kind of just like going on with their lives as Venus is just kind of like going crazy. Which there's definitely a place for that in life. It's not a judgment call on day drinking or having fun, but I think today can just be one of those days where we can take that to an extreme a little bit, which is also a possibility. It's for those reasons why I settled at a 2 difficulty and a 2 utility for today. Truly, the day is not very useful, but also it's not entirely difficult either. I think that the biggest thing is just that it can have the sense of restless energy. I just need to like get that funk out there somewhere. Yeah, but be mindful of what you're doing or how much you're doing or even why you're doing these things. Like I said last week, it's really important during this Venus retrograde to really pay attention to like your self-involved desires, I think is what I call it. Just this idea of the things that you really want that involve you and no one else, and how you can find a place for those things in your life. This idea of day drinking or partying or being reckless can be just a way to avoid answering some of those questions. So have fun. Think it through. And some of the signs I should be focusing on today are Aries, Gemini, Libra, Sagittarius, and Pisces. All right, getting ready to close our week. We arrive at our weekend. It is February 15th, Saturn's day. Saturn is in Pisces, out of element, peregrine, in Jupiter's decan, and Mars's terms. Saturn has moved a term, and also in the moon's Antisha. Very briefly, because the moon just will zoom as she does. Oh yeah, I'm really excited about this term change for Saturn. And the reason why that is that this is really the first time we're getting new territory for Saturn. We had to deal with a really long retrograde, and Saturn was pretty much in the middle of Pisces for most of 2024, really. So now we're really beginning to wrap up the Saturn and Pisces stay. Still have long ways to go because Saturn will only officially be out of Pisces by next year, but at least we're seeing new things in Pisces. But a thing that I thought that was really interesting about today is just this idea of the moon on Tisha. Because last week we had a moon trine to Saturn, which was really helpful. And now the moon being in Saturn's Antisha also means that the moon is in Saturn's exaltation sign. And you might even notice that the moon is also in her own decan. So she's really able to provide Saturn with a sense of balance and measured introspection. Like Saturn was really worrying about things last week, so maybe the moon is kind of like, yes, it's okay to worry about this, but like look at what you do have, or look at what you can do, especially considering how the moon started the week last week. I think that we really brought a lot of that sense of planning to a head here, and we're really kind of seeing it culminate for the Saturn people in the world. And so in the image, I just had a grumpy Saturn lady still inside her house. So she's still safe. She's not out in the streets anymore in Pisces. And she's just cutting some carrots and some vegetables to make a nice soup. A moon on Tisha is not that big of a transit. It's really this sort of transitory thing. And really the only reason why I feel like this is noteworthy is that the moon and Saturn are kind of exchanging signs in this intriguing sort of way. But I think that Saturn also entering Mars's terms and soon also entering Mars's decan, there's this sense of like, let's just get ready to wrap up this Pisces thing up. But before I do so, I also need to make sure that like my tummy is felt. This is the moon on Tisha. Just like Saturn, go eat a soup or just like feel good for a second before you start trying to wrap these things up faster than you should, because Mars will certainly try and push things a little bit, even if Saturn might be naturally slower. But yes, it's for those reasons that I also gave today a 2 difficulty and a 2 utility rating. It's really Saturn just getting ready for what's to come. And I think that this might be a good day to just, maybe have a self-care day or like a self-care moment to just get prepared for what's to come. It's really new territory for Saturn here. So we're going to see a lot of things that we haven't in 2024. And some signs that I should be paying close attention to today are Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. All right, and closing our week, we have February 16th. It is the Sun's day. The Sun is in Aquarius, out of element, in detriment, in the Moon's decan, in Saturn's terms, and trine to the Moon, which is pretty cool. Here we see the Sun at the last degrees of Aquarius, just getting ready to enter Pisces, with this really nice trine from the Moon. A trine from the Moon is not a big deal. The Moon moves so fast, we get trines all the time. But this one is a little special. The Sun really just doesn't love air signs in general, but it especially doesn't love Aquarius. It's the sign of the Sun's detriment. And so the Sun really can't benefit from any sort of help that it can get whenever it's in Aquarius. When Mercury was in Aquarius, the Sun had a little bit of help from Mercury to really rationalize some of the struggles that the Sun might have been having. But now that the Sun is towards the end of Aquarius, Mercury has moved on and joined Saturn, the actual ruler of Aquarius and Pisces. Both of these planets are now unable to see the Sun in his last minutes or his last days of this Aquarian stay. But then, when all is thought to be lost, the Moon comes with this trine, and what's interesting is that the last decan of Aquarius is actually ruled by the Moon, so this means that the Moon is able to provide some of that help to the Sun that the Sun might need. And I always think about that decan as a decan of just like, let's leave this, just go. So in the image, I have the Sun getting ready to hop on this boat to enter Pisces land. Well, he's not doing it alone. He's not entirely troubled. He's having the help from the Moon, who comes in and brings his suitcase full of the things that the Sun might need. It's kind of just like, yes, things are rough, but here's what you need. Just leave this place already. I know you don't like it, sort of vibe. And so for today, we might be getting ready to cross these thresholds, and we might have the help from people in our lives to actually do so. So we're not just on our own, even though we might have felt like we were on our own for the past month or so. That's why I settled at 3.5 evenly for today. The Sun definitely is having a bit of a difficult time, but we also have a lot of assistance from the Moon and the people that we love in our lives to continue to do what it is that we need to do. We're about to head into some confusing times, and that help is definitely welcome. And some of the signs that this might be relevant to might be Cancer, Leo, and Aquarius. And with that, that is our week. Let's take a look at our week at a glance. It seems like we're pretty even. I think it's been a long time since we gotten a 2.5 evenly for both categories. So I think that this is really a middling week. It's this sort of like in-between space before things actually start happening, but they haven't quite started happening yet. Some of the best days of the week, I would definitely look to Monday as the best. Sunday also has some potential, but the difficulty being so high kind of makes it a little bit tricky to navigate. I would really just reserve my most important doings for Monday. Just do that. But with that, this has been our week. I am Joe G, and you can find me at themercuryrising.com. And as always, if you'd like some more information about this week, specifically for your sign, you can always subscribe to my newsletter. I send it every Monday with a little bit more information than you get in these horoscopes, just so you know what all this means to you specifically, not just to everybody. But with that, I hope to see you there, and I hope to see you next week.